That storm was something we'd never witnessed in our quiet little town. The sky was pitch black, except when lightning lit it up for a split second, revealing the old manor at the edge of town. You know, the one, everyone talked about it, but nobody dared to go near it, except for Jake. He was that guy who laughed at danger, always up for a challenge, always trying to prove he wasn't scared of anything. That night, we were hanging out, watching the storm from my porch when someone, probably Dave, joked, "Hey, Jake, bet you wouldn't last an hour in the manor tonight." Jake smirked, grabbed a flashlight, and said, "Watch me." We all thought he was kidding, but before we knew it, he walked up the hill, toward that creepy old place. We followed at a safe distance, of course. No way were we going inside, but we weren't about to miss the show either. The manor looked worse than I remembered. The gates creaked as Jake pushed them open, and the wind seemed to howl even louder, like it was warning him to turn back. He glanced back at us, grinned, and stepped inside. The door slammed shut behind him, and that's when the real terror began. In fact, we saw his light dashing here and there as flickered through cracked windows at first, probably poking in places, saying chickens or words to that effect to himself. After a minute or two passed, it then became stationary, and still laughing nervously, assuming it was his attempt at spooking us out. We listened for minutes of silence when suddenly the shriek erupted. That's not all. Just in shriek, it was Jake's shriek, shrill with fright. We froze. None of us dared move closer, but we could not just leave him in there, could we? Deciding what to do, the door opened on its own. That was all it took for Dave and the others. They took off. I wanted to run too, but something held me back to where I was standing. Minutes seemed like hours, but then I saw him, Jake, coming out of the house, his flashlight flickering weakly. His face was pale and his eyes were wide with fear. "We have to go," he whispered, barely loud enough to hear. It's in there." We did not ask questions. We just ran. By the time we finally reached my house, Jake collapsed on the couch, shaking. It took him hours to calm down enough to talk, and even then, what he said didn't make any sense. He said he had walked into the room and felt that there was something behind him. First, he thought it was just the storm playing games with his head. Then he saw it, a shadow moving across the corner of the room. He tried to run out, but the door wouldn't open. This is when the shadow took a shape. It became something long and twisted with holes for eyes. It called his name over and over until he screamed. We went back to the manor the next morning to see if it was really that bad, as Jake claimed, but the place felt different, darker. We did not go inside, of course, but we could feel it watching us. Jake never went back, and honestly, none of us blamed him. Even now, years later, I can't walk past that hill without feeling like something is staring at me from the windows. So, if you ever find yourself near that manor on a stormy night, take my advice, don't go in. Some doors are better left unopened.